Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Campus Compact's Impact Awards series. I'm Laura Weaver, Senior Manager for Strategic Initiatives, and I am excited to come to you again with our latest Impact Awards series session. I'm excited to have Lauren Shinholster here from Mercer University. She is going to be talking to us about their Visionary Student Panel, which was one of our Impact Award winners this year. And I cannot wait for you all to hear about it. As I'm looking over our chat, I see a lot of familiar names and institutions. So I think we are all in for a treat to learn more about Mercer University's program and why it was one of Campus Compact's award winners this year. Lauren, I am excited to turn it over to you so that we can learn more all about this great program of yours. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Laura, for the introduction and for this space to highlight Mercer's Visionary Student Panel program. This October will actually mark 10 years since the first VSP. So this recognition from Campus Compact, as well as the space to share in this webinar, really comes at an ideal time to reflect on the 10 years of this program and then also chart our path forward. So I'm excited to be here today to highlight VSP. So a little bit about today's webinar. Although it will be more informational than interactive, I encourage you all to share questions or ideas throughout today's presentation. That can be done using the Q&A or the chat feature, particularly if you have any ideas for program adoption or implementation, using the chat throughout today's presentation would be highly encouraged. In our time together, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the Visionary Student Panel's founding vision, how we've evolved throughout the past decade. I'll highlight the current structure for our program. And then lastly, we'll talk about hopefully the next 10 plus years looking ahead. A little bit about myself. I'm Lauren Shinholster. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Associate Director of Engaged Learning at Mercer University. My role at Mercer supports capacity building for service learning and service research courses. When I talk about capacity building, that looks quite a few different ways. Oftentimes, it is hosting professional development events like workshops, webinars, networking with the Center for Engaged Learning is a popular event that we host each year. It also means providing project support. So I love going into our classrooms, doing class visits, providing additional support through class presentations. It can also mean providing project support funding for faculty members doing engaged learning work. I serve as the administrator for Bear Pulse, which is their Mercer branded version of Give Pulse, a platform that we use for volunteer and service and civic engagement tracking and management on our campus. I am a co-leader of Mercer Votes, which is our nonpartisan voter engagement initiative. I've been doing that work since 2017, and we'll talk a little bit about Mercer Votes as it relates to the Visionary Student Panel in just a few slides. And then finally, the reason we're here, I am the director of Visionary Student Panel and have been overseeing that program since 2022. And a proud alumna of Spelman College and the University of Georgia, two institutions that have really shaped my passion for community engagement and my belief in collective action. So that's just a little bit about me. About Mercer, if you're unfamiliar with our institution, Mercer University is a comprehensive private R2 research institution. My office, the Center for Engaged Learning, is located on Mercer's main campus in Macon, Georgia, about an hour and 15 minutes south of Atlanta on a really good traffic day. But Mercer has campuses throughout the state, including Atlanta, Savannah, Columbus, as well as regional academic centers throughout Georgia as well. Mercer has a little over 9,000 students total enrollment for undergraduates and graduate students, and that's across 12 colleges and schools, including our School of Pharmacy, School of Law, and our medical school. So quite a significant footprint throughout the state and globally. At Mercer, we believe that every student majors in changing the world. This banner is quite prominent on our campus and will also be prominent in today's presentation. But it really reflects the culture of service that we see at our institution. I believe strongly that this in alignment with our institutional culture is one of the reasons why Visionary Student Panel has been successful for the past 10 years. But we see this reflected in our curricular and co-curricular spaces. It's something that our students live as a part of our mission. And so these banners are literally every few yards as you walk onto our campus. And then finally, it would be important to mention that Mercer beat Duke. This is not actually relevant for today's presentation, but I always like to have this fun fact in my back pocket. It really calls out to an iconic moment in Mercer's history. And I would like to think that much like this win over Duke, the Visionary Student Panel could be transcended time and just as iconic. And so I want to include that fact here today. So what is the Visionary Student Panel? The Visionary Student Panel, or VSP, is a program that supports undergraduate students in their development of independent projects. When we talk about these projects, they are projects designed to address a real-world problem at the local or regional level. We accomplish this goal through a combination of intentional coaching, the annual VSP showcase, where students have the opportunity to pitch their ideas, and then finally, the opportunity to apply for mini grant funding. VSP holds quite a significance on Mercer's campus because it serves as a bridge between students' curricular experiences. And oftentimes we see VSP as a platform for increasing the sustainability of service learning courses at Mercer. Since 2015, VSP has supported over 198 students who have helped shape 110 projects, and we have allocated $30,000 in award funding to help support the development of those student projects. And so this is something that we're quite proud of, the footprint of VSP and our ability to persevere through some challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we'll talk a little bit about how this program has evolved throughout those 10 years. So how did we get here? Visionary Student Panel is conceived as a part of Mercer's 2015 Quality Enhancement Plan, which is entitled Research That Reaches Out. If you're not familiar with the Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP, it serves as a significant component of our SAC-COC reaccreditation process. And so the QEP is really an institutional strategic plan that helps shape your focus for the next 5 years. So from 2015 to 2020, Mercer was dedicated to implementing research that reaches out, but we also see this persist way past the implementation of the QEP, which was ultimately the goal for having this particular program focus. With research that reaches out, we have two guiding goals. One is to enhance student learning through service-focused research, and then two is to foster a culture of civic engagement through scholarship and service. So once again, here with the banners, we talk about students majoring in changing the world, but research that reaches out is the vehicle for that change making that happens, and it's also featured prominently at the banner. So thinking about not QEP, but the VSP program, I want to take us back to October 12th, 2015. There's a press release announcing the very first QEP. Here's a quote that comes from Dr. Bridget Trogdon, who at the time was the Director of Research That Reaches Out, but is now Dean of Students at American University. Dr. Trogdon states that the idea of the Visionary Student Panel comes from a year-long discussion with students and student groups. The opportunity to share their ideas publicly was very empowering to them. Students indicated that events such as this set a high bar for connecting their knowledge to real-world issues they care about, and they look forward to rising to the challenge. And so through these conversations with students that takes place over the course of 2014, Dr. Trogdon is able to understand the value of having a supportive environment that allows students to do a little bit of risk-taking, healthy risk-taking with shaping their ideas. Students enjoy being in a space where their ideas will be heard and not only critiqued, but critiqued in the sense that they're providing constructive feedback to help shape and improve those ideas. Because our students believe so strongly in the mission of Mercer, they want these spaces to have additional mentorship and to be able to connect their academic experiences to real world issues. And so VSP provides a space for that. When we think about the early years of the Visionary Student Panel program, it is going through quite a few different iterations, but we see that common thread of students needing mentorship and seeking empowerment being consistent throughout. Because our connection to the QAP, the early years of the Visionary Student Panel are a little broad in scope or scale in terms of examining local, national, or global problems, whereas today's current version of VSP is a little more targeted towards just local or regional issues. We also see this connection to grand challenges, which are these broad conceptual issues that we want students to think about. And so in 2015, with the first VSP, students are focusing on social responsibility. In 2016, they look at economic freedom. And in 2017, personal well-being. And then those repeat throughout the QEP cycle. There's also an element of competition that exists just in our first VSP. In 2015, we had 2 nights of presentations. Night one, students that were interested in a competitive pitch format were able to showcase their ideas. And then the top 3 performers were awarded funding for having the best presentation on that first night. On October 14th, the second night, students are able to just share their ideas and receive some feedback from our expert panel of judges. The element of competition, I think, is important, but not necessary for VSP. And so we see that element removed starting in 2016. And instead, VSP Showcase is really just a space to provide feedback. And then students are able to then reflect on that feedback and improve their plans for implementation moving forward. When we start to shift from 2017 to 2020, VSB becomes more of a fully developmental process where students are receiving some mentorship or coaching to really shape their ideas before they get to that pitch showcase. And with each year in conception of the program, we're able to strengthen that mentorship angle more and more. And so you'll hear me talk about that as we talk about 2025 and beyond. And so I wanted to give a few examples of the early VSP projects that we see come about between 2015 and 2017, because these projects really lay a groundwork for the type of impact that we're hoping to see with Visionary Student Panel. The first one that I had to highlight is a program that is really, really near and dear to me because it's such a critical piece of the work that I do at Mercer, overseeing our Mercer Votes initiative. SoCon Votes is a project that was pitched in VSP in 2015. It is the first Democratic engagement competition for a Division I athletic conference. And so when we think about SoCon Votes, Joey Wozniak, at that time, Mercer student and SGA president, is really concerned about voter engagement, not just at Mercer, but really nationally. And Joey has an idea that it really isn't an issue of students being apathetic about voting. Instead, it's really about having access to voter resources and making sure that it's a priority for our students. With Joey's idea, SoCon Votes becomes a challenge or a competition between institutions in the Southern Conference. We create a playbook or action plan to help shape our voter engagement plans, recognizing that it's important for students to have voter engagement resources year-round, not just on major election years. And so this begins to shape Mercer's work at institutionalizing voter engagement. With this action plan, we began to host nonpartisan voter engagement events that help students register to vote and turn out to vote. And we don't see this just happening on Mercer's campus. We see this replicated throughout the Southern Conference, culminating eventually in getting an award for the greatest voter turnout. Mercer wins that first award in 2016, and we've been fortunate to win 3 times. We don't win every year, but Joey is instrumental in making this happen. And when we look at the impact of it, it's not just happening at Mercer, it's happening throughout the Southern Conference, but then we see it replicated throughout the nation. And so here's a picture that provides a snapshot of the work that Joey helped inspired as a part of VSP that goes on and now is a part of the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge. And so those are just a snapshot of the athletic challenges, but we also see Joey's model replicated in several statewide challenges. A second VSP project to highlight that really shows a connection between curricular experiences and co-curricular is the Hispanic Health Fair. This is pitched in the 2016 VSP and is a springboard for a student's senior honors project. I'm inspired by her service learning work in Dr. Jose Pino's class. Kim is able to understand that there's a need for increasing access to health care services and resources within the Hispanic community in Macon, Georgia. And so a part of Kim's pitch in 2016 is creating a health fair that would provide some free diagnostic services. Back on March 18th, 2017, we see the first Hispanic Health Fair hosted here in Macon at St. Peter Claver. Over 11 screenings are offered, including high blood pressure screenings, cholesterol, diabetes, and glucose checks. And from there, over 150 participants from the community are able to receive those services. This is an important project to highlight because we see that the Hispanic Health Fair continues to persist well past VSP, but we also see this unique sharing of information and knowledge from our students who may be looking to shape their foreign language skills. Also looking at working with our nursing and medical school and having those students shape the healthcare screenings that are provided there, but then also looking at the work and the partnerships that we formed with local churches, K through 12 institutions as well. And so Hispanic Health Fair is always a program that we highlight when we talk about the success of the Visionary Student Panel. As we look beyond 2015 to 2017, we see a shift in VSP, in large part due to the pandemic. Thank you, COVID. But out of those challenges, we see an opportunity to really grow and expand our access for the program. We don't hold a VSP in 2020, but we return in spring 2021 with a virtual showcase. And that virtual component becomes important because it opens our eyes to the fact that many aspects of the Visionary Student Panel can be completed virtually. And so today, from the application to interviewing students to also doing those coaching sessions, we're able to complete all of that virtually. We keep our showcase in person, but there's certainly space to make that virtual again as well. Another significant change that happens towards the latter half of this decade of implementation is looking at a shift in the applicant pool. Because we want to make sure that our students are conscious about the programs and ideas that they implement, particularly those that are involving the community, we wanted to make sure that they had enough time to implement their ideas with fidelity. And so in 2024, we see a shift to limiting our applications to just current first year students, sophomores, and juniors. There are pros and cons to making that shift, particularly for first year students. A lot of times they are very energized and want to do something, which is great. We always want to support that initiative. But the difficult piece is that as first year students, they may not always have enough knowledge about the campus landscape or the landscape of our community when we talk about the broader community as in Macon, Georgia. And so with our first year students, we often invest a little more time into helping them shape their ideas, but also raising their awareness of the assets that are already existing within our community. Now, looking forward from 2025 and beyond, there's going to be a greater focus on project implementation support. That was already happening in several informal ways, but we see that there's a great opportunity to make sure that students don't just apply for mini grant funding and then do nothing with it, but actually shape their ideas and provide some formalized ways to check on their progress as they implement those ideas throughout the next academic year. So for today's VSP program, some of the hallmarks to keep in mind would be these three phases. In phase one, students are preparing for the showcase. In phase two, we are preparing for the mini grant application. And then phase three is all about project implementation. And so I'm going to go through the features of each phase and talk about some of the challenges, but also successes that we see within each phase. And these are things that I would hope that you all would consider if you're looking at adopting a program like VSP on your campus. So in phase one, preparing for the showcase, this generally happens between January and March. Although I open up the application for VSP typically in the fall semester, we see most students looking to apply for the program around January. And January is also the time that I start to engage with students through the interview process. Our VSB application is very simple. Outside of just applicant demographic information, I ask students to just simply describe the social issue they would hope to address in their VSP project. From there, we hold a 20-minute Zoom interview. And during that interview, I have very specific questions that I ask each student or student group. And those questions mirror the topics or questions that we want them to address during their pitch. If they're accepted to the VSP program, students are required to do two mandatory coaching sessions. Session one helps shape their project idea. This is their time to reflect on questions that may have bubbled up during their interview. Generally, when students are in the interview phase, they have a clear understanding of the social issue they want to address, but they may not have a clear understanding of what they want to do or who they need to connect with to get that plan done. And so session one helps shape their project idea. It is not focused on the pitch at all. Between sessions one and sessions two, students take my feedback. They're then able to get their presentation template, which we've learned over the years. It is much, much easier to focus students by giving them a presentation template, keeping things uniform, and keeping them locked in to just the few questions that I have on the slide right here. And so during session two, that is their opportunity for the students to show me a draft of their presentation. They're able to rehearse their delivery of their 5-minute pitch. I give a little bit of feedback, and then they're able to resubmit a final presentation in the days before the showcase. So for students, for their 5-minute pitches, here are the questions we want them to address. We want them to explain the social issue they plan to address. Through that, they have to provide some supporting documentation or evidence. So there has to be some data to support the need of their project. We want students to be able to articulate why they care about this social issue. And for our students, we see all sorts of things motivating them. Sometimes it's their own lived experience or the experiences of a classmate. Sometimes they just see a need that exists within their community or within the campus community. But I want them to be able to state why they care and in some way defend it as well, because having a good idea is a great start, but simply having the good idea is not enough. We ask them to explain what they plan to do and give us a little bit of timeline for the implementation. Doesn't have to be completely fleshed out at this point. And then the last piece, what's already being done, is really important because once again, we want them to be able to recognize that there's probably someone here on campus or in the community already doing this work. Students, particularly first-year students, get to campus and they're very fired up about all the changes that they could be a part of, but we want to make sure that they are respectful and mindful of the political climate within our campus, also the political climate that exists beyond the walls of Mercer. So making sure that we are mindful of our stakeholders and then looking to them as potential assets is really important. The VSP showcase happens in March, and it includes an expert panel of judges. These panelists, usually 4 or 5 of them, they can be faculty, staff, community partners, or alumni of the VSP program. Because I've been working with the students from January to early March, I usually have enough runway to be able to handpick panelists that will speak to the specific topics that our students are pitching. So if a student is really excited about doing something in youth engagement, I'll then secure a panelist that has a focus or expertise in youth engagement. If a student is excited about housing or food insecurity, I then go find a faculty member that maybe has a service learning course related to that topic. I do this strategy because number one, I know the things that I know, but I may not be an expert on all the topics that are presented at VSP. And so having those expert panelists is able to enrich the feedback that students are going to get, but also it could be a springboard to helping students shape or reshape their ideas or potentially partner with those panelists on those projects. So the expert panel is key to a successful showcase. The panel provides constructive feedback. There have been comments before about VSP, and in previous iterations of it, we said that it's a socially conscious Shark Tank without the meanness or spite. And so the vibe of VSP is that it's constructive, it's supportive, and is there to really just shape their ideas and hopefully inspire a new direction if it's necessary. When we look at phase 2 of the program, the mini grant application, um, all showcase participants at this stage of VSP are now invited to apply for mini grant funding. This is a shift that we have seen for over the years, where the funding piece was a little more selective. But now our cohort of VSP participants is at a manageable size that really allows us to award funding to any student that is interested in participating in the program and satisfies the program requirements. Our funding applications are due in April. And so once again, with the showcase happening in March, gives students a little bit of time to reflect on the feedback that they've received and then prepare a funding application that asks them again to explain their implementation plan and then also provide us a detailed budget plan as well. Funding for the mini grant for VSP ranges from $100 to $1,000. We know that this is not groundbreaking money, but it is enough to kind of sow a seed of a program that could be piloted or maybe expanded. And it's important to know that this funding comes directly from the Center for Engaged Learning budget, so we want to make sure that we are good stewards of those funds. And so I added a note here to point out that I handle the purchasing for those students. So when they are awarded their mini grant from the VSP program, they're very excited and often eager to begin spending those funds. But because I have such a role in understanding their funding applications and I'm handling the purchasing, that provides another layer of protection, so to speak, to make sure that students are mindful about what they're planning to implement, mindful about the scale of their plans, and then also mindful of things like if I buy these supplies, where am I going to store them? And so that gives another layer of protection when we talk about the logistics for their project implementation. And so that was an important piece to call out. When we get to our third phase of the program, project implementation, this is really the aspect of the program that we see the greatest opportunity for growth or strengthening. Throughout this process, participants are able to continue to refine their ideas and strengthen partnership development. Because the VSP's current iteration spans academic years, we hope and pray that students will use the summer for a time to really shape their ideas and meet with their groups if they're doing a group presentation. But oftentimes we see students really kind of springing back to action once they return to school in the fall. And so implementation generally occurs starting in August and goes until the end of the academic year. Usually around April or May is when we see students wrapping up those project ideas. So when they spend the next year implementing their projects, they get to continue to meet with me for check-ins and for continued project guidance. But this is really a time to continue to shape their ideas, point them in a different direction if necessary. But one of the things that I wanted to point out here is that if you don't have a sound plan for structuring check-ins at this phase of the project, you will often see students disengage. And so having students that are really fired up about sharing that idea is great. And I think is an important aspect of VSP. But my goal is that ultimately every student project that is pitched at our showcase will actually be implemented. And so that is going to be a focus that we see moving forward with the program. And so I want to highlight a couple of the projects that we've seen come out of VSP in recent years. And here are two projects that we've seen come from our 2024 cohort. On our left-hand side, we have Srija Pandiri talking about access to student period products. She has this idea that comes from her student leadership in SGA and really gets a sense of campus needs that are not being met adequately. So a part of Srija's project is partnering with Aunt Flo to provide period product dispensers in high traffic areas on campus. With her VSP funds and her support from SGA, Shrija was able to get two period product dispensers installed on campus last school year. One in our student center, Connell Student Center, and then one in the University Center, where we're not only getting traffic from students, faculty, and staff, but we're also getting a lot of traffic from community members, since that's where our basketball arena and gym are located. And so Srija has a very powerful project, but it was also a project that was a little more straightforward in implementation and really just needed an infusion of funds to help get those period product dispensers installed. In contrast, on our right-hand side, we see two students leading a project called Mercer Youth. Mercer Youth is focused on mental health awareness and delivering mental health curriculum at local high schools. With this project, Mercer Youth is looking at discussion-based curriculum and also gamifying their lessons and really needed VSP for support to provide incentives for students to participate in that program. One of the differences between Srija's project and the project that we see it with Mercer Youth is that the Mercer Youth project had already been implemented, already piloted. These students came in with this idea before they had even arrived at Mercer. And so VSP was really a capacity building platform for their project. From these recent projects, we've received some recognitions beyond the recognition that we have from Campus Compact. But in 2024, we're credited with the Best Student Impact Award for my poster called Crafting the Vision, Exploring the Visionary Student Panel Program, where I walk our audience through the structure of VSP. We also see our students being awarded the Most Innovative Project for the good, the bad, and the unfinished, bridging the gap between history and community through social advocacy. This project actually looks at Mercer's integration and chronicles the story of Mercer's integration, but then also looks at current initiatives aimed at inclusion on our campus. Similarly, in 2025, Mercer wins Best Student Project for Hidden Threads, Intellect, Diversity, and Religious Freedom. This is presented by three students, Beckham, Savannah, and Raven. And their project works with the Mercer Library to strengthen our archives and our representation of stories from students that are in the LGBTQ community. So it chronicles Mercer's history, but then also has some interviews that highlight unique student perspectives. And so showing the impact and being able to demonstrate the outcomes of a program like VSP, I think is instrumental in making sure that a program like this continues on. Finally, I have to highlight our current cohort. This is from 2025, and these students have not yet implemented their ideas, but are certainly on their way to implementing their projects. And so for this year, as I mentioned earlier, we have 9 students that participate in the showcase, and all 9 of them have applied for funding and awarded those funds. Their projects span quite a broad range of topics. This year and moving forward, we have general calls for students to submit applications. And so we see a range of topics focusing on campus issues, or also issues that we see in the Macon and Middle Georgia area. And so a couple of projects to highlight that I'm really excited about, although I have no favorites, would be enhancing the commuter community as a group of commuter students that really have opened my eyes to some of the challenges that commuters face on campus. And so they are looking at our commuter lounge and looking at ways to upgrade the commuter lounge to better suit their needs. Another project that I'm really excited about is Kits for a Cause, which is all about affordable and accessible prosthetic kits for veterans. And so this is a project that really showcases the value of students having access to undergraduate research, but takes an idea that was shaped by research experience and then now leveled up by having these funds to create the prosthetic kits and provide that to local centers supporting veterans. Another one to highlight is Making Civics Matter, which will be focusing on bringing local judges into local high schools. And so, how can those judges help shape students' understanding of civics? But then also, how can those local high school students shape a civics project and implement that themselves? And so, I would love to see that happen because it could be a model for implementing a VSP-like program in the K through 12 system. And so I've done a lot of talking. I want to take a moment for a little bit of reflection, but also it'll give me an opportunity to check if you all have any questions or ideas that you want to share. And so as we reflect, a couple of prompts that you all may consider. One, imagine what the next 5 to 10 years of VSP could look like. What possibilities come to mind? Another, if you're considering implementing a program like VSP on your campus, I would ask you all to reflect about how does a program like this that centers student innovation and change making align with your institutional mission or strategic goals? And then also consider what existing programs, resources, or partnerships could serve as a foundation for a VSP-like initiative. And so I'm going to pause just for a second and see if you all have any ideas or questions.
Lauren, I just want to say this was a great presentation so far. And I have a question for you. I see for your reflection and questions opportunity, I'm wondering if folks would like to voice their questions instead of type them. If you would be willing, if folks want to raise their hand, I can actually give them the availability to talk if that is something that you're open to.
I'm definitely open. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, and I see Dean wrote that in the chat, and I know that Dean had his hand up. So yes, if folks want to voice their question, raise your hand. If you would rather put your questions either in the chat or the Q&A, I am happy to give those questions to pass those on over to Lauren. So we can do it either way, but I think we're going to open it up to Dean first because I think Dean is going to kick us off.
Hello.
So Dean, you are open to talk.
Hello, hello. Are we able to hear me?
Yes.
We
Excellent.
are.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting program. So I think I am at large interested in implementing a program similar to this. I've been kind of around this idea for some time. Um, but one problem that I seem to face at our institution is a lack of requirement from leadership down to the student. It's been my sense that we can provide a program like this, we can set it up, maybe we even get some initial funding, and then if students don't, sure, we get a student or two who's interested, but if we have a program or something that's tied to it that really requires the students to be involved in something like this, or an experiential learning opportunity at large, that really increases the likelihood that we get the attendance and subsequent funding for following years. What does the requirement component look like for your university? And maybe as part of that same question, how do you initially get funding or buy-in from faculty, staff, and employers?
Those are really great questions, Dean. Um, Approaching it from two different angles. One, I think we have it pretty easy at Mercer because we have that strong culture of service. And so programs like VSP aren't necessarily trying to build engagement, is trying to enhance the engagement that already exists on our campus. And so I think VSP, one of the things that has, really going for it was number one, the alignment with our QEP. So there was an energy around it in terms of faculty and staff support, but then also funding support for it as well. But one of the things that has helped us, particularly in the early years of VSP, was linking those student projects to academic experiences. So those initial projects rely heavily on having programs like, at that time, Mercer Service Scholars, which is an honors program, also having a curriculum that was tied to major university initiatives or programs like Mercer on Mission, and then also being tied to students' seniors honors projects or thesis or things like that. And so I would say in your case, um, starting small and then scaling up with a program like this is always helpful. And so looking at how you could embed the tenets or hallmarks of a program like this, maybe just in a class or a student organization, might be the best way to start, and then allows you to build a little bit of trust, but also show the potential impact or outcomes. And then from there, you could level it up where it's going to be more of an institutional wide initiative. For us, I think the funding is an important piece of VSP, but it is not the most important piece. And so oftentimes just having students share their ideas in the showcase is really the most important or developmental piece that is a part of this project. And so, if funding is a bit of a hang up there, I would say that you could look at it as an asset, but not necessarily a requirement. For our institution, Mercer does have an experiential learning requirement, but we don't require that students have any particular amount of service hours. We see that with some, different programs or departments, but it's not a university-wide mandate. So students interested in a program like VSP on our campus, they are not required to participate. They're simply doing that because they feel motivated to be able to get their ideas out there. And so that's something that is important to note, that we don't have any specific mandates or requirements. We just have a lot of good student energy helping to shape this idea. Also, it's important to note that I'm not under any particular pressures to attract a certain number of students to VSP. Early years of the program, we definitely saw larger cohorts of students. Oftentimes, there would be more than 20 projects pitched as a part of the VSP showcase, but then only a small subsection of students would be eligible for that funding. Now we've kind of flipped things where I generally only support 9 or 10 students participating in the showcase, and that's more manageable in terms of how I guide their project implementation, but also more manageable in terms of how much funding those students may need. And so, Dean, I hope that answers your question. I would definitely be open to talking to you after this about specific aims of your program.
That was very informative. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lauren, there we have another question from the Q&A. And this question is, so many universities are providing spaces for student innovation and entrepreneurship. And I know that has been a big trend that we have been seeing across higher ed and across community engagement spaces. This individual would like to know, what advice would you give to other colleges, kind of based on your experience that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question that comes from Dr. Trogdon. Thank you, creator, founder of VSP. But as we look at today's landscape, I think more and more students are looking at the value of higher education, looking to be able to prove that this education that they receive is worthwhile and connected to outcomes. Advice that I would give to someone if they're just starting out with a program like this, um, of course, start small and scale up would be some, sound advice to give. But I would also, ask them to look critically at the structures that exist within their institution. I know for me, with a focus on getting our first year and sophomores connected to these types of projects, they don't always have access to mentorship or know how to go about gaining access to mentorship. And so I think if you have a increased emphasis on the what next part of a program like this, moving beyond just pitching our idea, but what do we do next? That could certainly help shape that. And so that is something that I've looked at with our program of, how can I include more voices in the implementation phase where we have faculty or staff mentors or alumni mentoring the development of these projects, because that is the biggest piece there that can be strengthened. But then also look at other offices like your Center for Career and Professional Development is what we have here in Mercer's campus. Can students with interests in community engagement be connected with a community partner that may have a need for an intern, and then that help inspire their project? We've also looked at, maybe having our community partners put out a call or a request for proposals, because that really helps center Mercer's commitment to community engagement by centering the community need. And so there's really, certain different angles that you could approach this while still honoring student voice and that, desire for innovation.
Yes, great advice. I was writing down some of the things that you were saying, and they were definitely echoing some of the things that we here at Campus Compact have been talking a lot about, the mentorship aspect, mentorship at all levels. We talk about that all the time, like student mentorship, peer mentorship, peer-to-peer mentorship, faculty mentorship. It's just such an important key aspect of this work altogether. And the other thing that I heard you echoing over and over and over was something else that Dr. Trogdon put in the comments was a great theme that, yes, I heard throughout your presentation was a key fact of this work is knowing your campus and what your value is and building from that, like knowing your campus culture. And that is something that, as I heard you talking today, just was reiterated over and over and over. And it was just so great. And I'm seeing it must be several folks that are with us today from career
Yes.
services and the career centers. And I think that's also an important thing that I was hearing you say too, just in your comment now, but I kind of picked up on that theme throughout your presentation of like partnership across campuses. And I think that's such a great aspect and something that we always need to remember is how can we partner with other entities across campuses um, and reach out. I remember being on a campus, and I was so fortunate that when I was hired, also a new director of career services was hired, and our offices were across the hall from each other. And we were able to create such great partnership energy with that. And so it seems like that's something that you are also doing there through this program. And I'm assuming through many other programs as well. Um, I do have a question, but I want to see if anybody else has questions before I ask mine. Do we have any other questions? Anybody wants to raise their hand or ask anything? Okay, well, I'm going to ask this one, and it might be our last one. One of the things that you talked about early on was kind of in the history. Oh, we do have one from Sean. Okay, Sean. Go ahead and if you'll raise your hand again, I can give you the ability to voice your question. Okay, Sean, you are up.
Thank you so much. I'll be quick. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that students pitch their projects during the showcase. And from showcase to funded, what would you approximate on average is the time frame in which these students can expect to go from general ideas to implementation of those ideas to funded and it becomes maybe a service on the campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I start working with students formally in January. They do their pitch showcase in March. They apply for funding in April, and then they start hitting the ground running from there. For some students, they are already, thinking about implementation, already, you know, have done a pilot of their program. And so, I think I mentioned it earlier that they really just need, help across the finish line by getting that additional funding. So for those students, it could be just, from March at the showcase to then December that they're implementing. But to the last part of your question about it being a service on campus, that is a little different. We see, some programs or projects have a little more sticking or lasting power than others. And so we see some projects that really have helped shape services or the culture of programs on campus. One that immediately comes to mind is our work with MU Miracle. MU Miracle was pitched as a part of VSP, but now we see that as a club that does some excellent philanthropic work at Mercer and has persisted for several years. But they had a foundation or model for that program that made it easier to implement. They also had faculty involvement that helped shape that initiative. And so, really, with our current structure of the program, I support them for the full academic year while they implement. But how they leverage their program beyond that is really up to the students and up to the work that they've done over that course of the academic year to either find a office or program on our campus that can help the program persist beyond their time with VSP. One of the things that I have seen that has come up over the last 2 years is students are interested in circling back to the VSP program and they want to know, like, can we share ideas again? Can we give an update about our project? Is there opportunity to get continued funding? And so that's something that we've explored. How can we get those students invested in the program, particularly if they're applying just in their first or second year? How can we continue our support for those students while having a new cohort come aboard as well? So that's a great question. It really just depends.
Okay, that was a great question. And actually, the ending part of your question kind of answered another question that I had around the sustainability of different projects and things like that. So thank you, Lauren, for that.
And so I just have a couple more slides just to wrap things up, but we really have touched on those things through your questions. So thank you all for those questions. But with VSP, looking at increasing the focus on supporting project implementation and grant utilization, as I mentioned earlier, is certainly a priority. Formalizing check-ins, that is something that we're going to be doing quarterly with our students. But then also, how can we embrace this cohort model? How can students learn from one another to strengthen their implementation plans is certainly a priority. And then how can we use our network of alumni VSP participants to strengthen implementation? Particularly for our campus-based projects, we see a lot of those projects coming out of groups like Student Government Association. So within those communities, how can we help nurture and shape their ideas? And then finally, supporting dissemination. We have a Bear Day on campus where students can share their research, but also students crave being able to go to conferences and being able to present their ideas. And so moving forward, we will have expectation that students are doing showcases or presentations like Bear Day at minimum. And then finally, we've touched on these considerations for adoption, but institutional alignment, I think, is the key, but also capacity for implementation. You can start small and focus just on the pitch showcase, but there may be other programs that exist on your campus, like elevator pitch competitions or things out of your business school that students can lean on. And so thinking about how you can build on those things, particularly if there is a social issue that you've identified in your campus or in your community that is going unmet. And then finally, the ability to demonstrate student outcomes. So not just, did you like this program or did you feel like you benefited from the program, but how did it inform your learning and how do you plan to apply the learnings from VSP to your career outcomes or your academic experience, I think are important pieces to have if you're considering adopting a program like this. And so I think we're almost out of time, but if there are any final questions, I would love to hear them. And thank you all once again for your time. And thank you, Laura, for this space.
This was a great session, Lauren. I learned so much. So thank you for joining us and being here. If anybody has any final questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and I can unmute you. In the meantime, I added to the chat that tomorrow will be our we'll have another Impact Award webinar and we'll be featuring the University of Iowa, and you can still register for that session. So again, thank you so much. We're getting lots of comments about your amazing presentation, Lauren. So again, great job. I learned so much about the VSP program and all the amazing work that you all are doing there at Mercer. So if we have any final questions before we let everybody go on to the next part of their day, and hopefully we will see lots of great programs similar to the VSP program. And I did hear Lauren say that she would be happy to chat with people offline afterwards. So we will be sending out the recording of this session as well as hopefully Lauren's slides um, shortly here later this week. So you can watch for those and we can go from there. So again, thank you so much for joining Campus Compact and our Impact Awards series. And we look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.